I'm John Tyner, I'm President of Public Affairs Forum, Accept No Substitutes. We are the body of, record for public affairs in the county, and we meet from 11:45 to 1 p.m. at the old spaghetti factory. And this is a membership-only group, but people or visitors are welcome, but to actually use that microphone to participate, you have to be a member. And Pat Mayberry is handy, and she'll sell you a membership at the regular price. No sales at this point in time. We'll see what attendance is like later in the year. In any event, we're here to talk about fish. That's Ballot Measure 81, which will prohibit commercial gill netting in Columbia River. We've got Norm Ritchie, who's going to come up here and tell us why that's not an issue anymore. Not yet, though. Almost ready. I appreciate the eagerness. Basically, and then we're going to bring on the candidates for House District 33 and 34, but we're going to go in reverse order. 34 is going to be Chris Harker and Republican Dan Mason. Because we've contracted the statewide ballot measure time period somewhat, we're going to expand their portion. And then I don't see Representative Greenlick's opponent here. Am I just not seeing what I ought to see? If not, then he'll have his time, full time, to open it up for his presentation of questions. Again, we're shrinking Mr. Ritchie's presentation down to, I think, 15 or 20 minutes with questions, and we're expanding House District 34 to 20 minutes, and which I believe 5 to 8 minutes of presentation, the rest are questions, and Mr. Greenlick can do whatever he wants to with his 15 minutes. You can do a soliloquy for 15 minutes, you can go for questions or whatever, but you'll be going towards the end just in case your opponent does still up. So this time, you're aware that I don't really introduce folks because I think it's self-serving and often awkward. So I'll let Mr. Ritchie tell you what he's here about. I don't see Save Our Salmon here, so I think he's correct. There is no opposition to his position or his representations. Sir, your microphone is yours.
Thank you. Okay, is that all right? Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll introduce myself. Again, Norm Ritchie with the Northwest Steelheaders, one of the coalition members that supported Measure 81. And without my opponents here today, I'm going to attempt to give you a non-biased history of what's been going on with this over the years, and then move into what the current situation is. At that point, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to not interject opinion and personal values and stuff, because at that point, even within our coalition and with other groups, there's been some divergence of strategies and so on. And then we'll get into questions and answers, and I'll give you all my opinions then. Okay, the history. Okay, commercial harvest diminished the runs of salmon long before there was significant deterioration of habitat that generated the wild populations of fish, and before there were dams. So there's nothing else to be pointed to with those initial losses of fish production. Okay. After the collapse, the methods that were being used at the time, which included seine nets, different types of trapping systems with weirs, and gill nets, were all being used with different levels of success. But there was an initiative done by the gill netters to eliminate all but the gill net method, and that was successful. So maybe I should tell you what a gill net is. A gill net is essentially a monofilament fishing line today that's tied up into rectangular grids, suspended in the water with a float line on top and a weight line on the bottom. The fish go into them, not seeing it because they're monofilament line, and generally they're harvested in the nighttime, so that their heads will go through, but their bodies can't. The gill net, by its name, gets around the gill plates and into the gills. So the gill net, because of that, tends to kill a lot of fish. You can try to untangle them, but if they've gotten the monofilament into their gills, it cuts the gills and damages them. And it's just like tearing out your lungs. You're not going to last for long after that. Okay. After that, hydro took its toll when Bonneville and the other dams were put in. But it was realized beforehand that that was going to be the case, and hatcheries were put in to replace that natural production. The hatcheries were there to mitigate and provide fish for harvest, not for restoring the wild runs. The resentment towards gill nets pretty much started in the 1950s. Since then, there's been initiatives and other efforts to just ban commercial fishing in the Columbia River, one of the few rivers in the country where that's still going on, and even fewer that do it over endangered and listed species. Okay. So the next stage was the development of mass marking. Salmon have a little fleshy fin ahead of the tail on its back called an adipose fin. The hatcheries started clipping those so that they could identify a hatchery fish from a wild fish. And steelheaders and other conservation and sport fishing groups supported the idea of marking all hatchery fish so that they could be identified and we could harvest just the hatchery fish. That became important when ESA listings started happening on the salmon runs. You're limited to an impact. An impact is a number of fish established each year based upon the run size of how many wild fish can be killed or otherwise lost to natural production through all the things that they have to deal with, be it dams, commercial fishing, sport fishing, or whatever. The impact number is divided between the tribal commercial fishing and everybody else. The everybody else portion is further divided between commercial fishing and sport fishing. The gill nets, as I said, kill a substantial number of the fish, somewhere around or in excess of 30% of the fish that are caught and then attempted to be released will die without reproducing. So with that, they are killing about one fish for every two fish they're allowed to keep. So they can have the same impact. Number of fish are allowed to take wild fish that are listed, but they'll only get 2 to 1 hatchery fish on average for that. On the other hand, sport fishing releases fish and has an impact due to where the hooks are set and that sort of thing, of somewhere around 10%. So sport fishing can get 10 hatchery fish out of the system for every wild fish impacted. Another factor there is gill nets are totally indiscriminate. Gill nets are going to capture whatever fish goes into them. Sturgeon, and steelhead, other species that are not allowed to be kept or harvested, in particular like sockeye, that are very endangered. And also, to a much lesser extent, but pointed by some of the coalition, birds and mammals get tangled up in these nets too and drown. Okay. As opposed to that, sport anglers hardly ever catch anything other than the specific species they're going for. If you're going for a Chinook, you're using lures this big. Steelhead, sockeye, and typically sturgeon aren't going to be taking that sort of thing. If you're going for sturgeon, you're using some kind of smelly old bait laying on the bottom, and all the salmon and steelhead never see it. So it's much more selective with sport fishing. On the other hand, commercial fishers, and particularly the tribes, are opposed to mass marking because of their impacts. They feel that if they kept everything they caught, they would ultimately kill less wild fish because they're killing so many of them that they're releasing. And they would reach their impact sooner, but impact fewer fish. Or, excuse me, would ultimately harvest fewer fish. Okay, so the next thing we got into was the safe areas, and that's select area fisheries enhancement. These are off-channel areas, away from the main stem of the river, where the wild fish are making their way to their headwaters and spawning beds. The safe areas being off in side channels, such as Young's Bay, I think that's the most visible one to people. If you're ever in Astoria, head over to Warrenton. There's a long bridge on 101. The upstream side of that area is Young's Bay. It's away from the Columbia River. And hatchery fish are acclimated to there. There's big net pens, and they'll put fish from the hatcheries into those net pens for several weeks. And they became imprinted with Young's Bay. So when they're released to go out to the ocean and come back big, they naturally return to Young's Bay, away from the wild fish that are going up the main stem of the Columbia. Therefore, the gill nets can fish in there and impact relatively few wild fish, and pretty much get all of the hatchery fish that are in there. So we've supported that, and with both the Oregon Department of Fish and Wildlife Commission for many years attempted to get this done through rulemaking, and then for about 10 years tried to get it through the legislature after the commission was less than responsive. During that 10 years, Governor Chris Harker finished his first 2 terms, and while he was still past governor, he provided a letter to the legislature supporting safer salmon. We continued that effort through this last legislative session, and when that failed, the Coastal Conservation Association, CCA, started the initiative that eventually became Measure 61. This initiative supports the concept of replacing gill nets in the main stem and in the bays with other gear essentially that was banned years ago. That kind of makes sense because whereas gill nets are indiscriminate and have high mortality, such things as purse seines, which is very fine mesh net that can be circled around the fish and then drawn tight at the bottom to close them in. And then you just draw the nets up without the fish getting tangled in it. As they get concentrated into smaller and smaller purse, you can pick them up, see if they got a fin. If they don't, you toss them in the boat. If they do, you toss them over the side. And the mortality rate, according to the Colville tribe, which has been testing this, is less than 1% in that method. So that's an alternative. Not as good, as, at least from the standpoint of the Northwest Steelheaders, as the safe proposal, but still moving in the right direction and getting them off of the untargeted species. So this is where things started going really weird. We get the initiative on the ballot, and we're very successful with that. Had all the signatures we needed, and a lot of support from a lot of both conservation, environmental, and sports groups on this issue. But then the governor, in the middle of August, sent a directive to the Department of Fish and Wildlife telling them to do what essentially we tried to get them to do 12, 14 years ago. And that was, by rule, using the best science, establish safe areas and relegate gill nets to those areas. In addition, the governor's directive told the commission that there should be a main stem cleanup fishery, because sport fishermen don't really catch a lot of the fish, and they want to prevent the hatchery fish from getting up in the spawning beds as much as possible. Hatchery fish are produced specifically to be harvested. So the idea is that they would have a main stem fishery, but not using gill nets, purse seines, or other methods after the sport fishery to harvest the rest of the hatchery fish. So that's the best of both worlds, and it's being done the way it should have been done in the first place through the commission, using the best science through the ODFW biologist staff that reports to them. And that's what's going on right now. So while all this was going on, we thought to ourselves, well, what's the best strategy? Should we continue to support this initiative and back the governor by showing that everybody supports this concept? And hopefully the governor's process will win out, and then the initiative wouldn't be needed. Or should we show the governor and the commission that we need to support the governor's directive and abandon the initiative? That initially kind of spread our coalition all over the place. Some of us were saying, we need to back the governor. We talked to people in the governor's office, and it just seemed like the best way to go, at least to me. Bob Olson, my lobbyist, is a little bit more concerned that the governor's office doesn't have quite enough clout to pull this off with all the political pressures that are going to take place. But we're well on our way to finding out. The governor's directive told the department to have a plan that would be complete within 3 years, and to put that plan into effect before the end of this year. So it's a very tight timeline. They're working hard. We're getting reports continuously from staff, a advisory committee they put forward. Our representative on the advisory committee is a gentleman named Jim Martin. He was Kitzhaber's original salmon recovery biologist, and one of the most knowledgeable people on salmon recovery and the fisheries in the area. So we're pretty happy with that. So at this point, we're supporting the governor's directive. We expect that most anglers who have been familiar with this issue over the years are probably going to continue to vote for the initiative for fear that the directive won't take place or won't be as fully implemented as we expect. On the other hand, the Salmon for All, the commercial fishing group representing both the gill netters themselves and the processors have opposed the initiative, have opposed the measure, and now pretty much oppose the governor's directive. But they're working within the commission system and the advisory group to get it watered down as much as they can. So it's a continuous battle and effort to find a happy median in all this. At this point, any questions?
In summary, you're advising a no vote on your initiative.
That's the position of the Northwest Steelheads. Like I said, I expect sport anglers who are concerned with what the governor can accomplish will continue to vote for it.
Okay, it's open for questions.
I'm a former member. I've read in the paper that even if this initiative passes, the result would be that gill netting is banned on the Oregon side, but on the Washington side, fishermen would still be able to use gill netting. Is that correct?
That's totally false. The truth is that the Washington Commission took action on the governor's directive by telling their director to put together the advisory group for the rulemaking, actually in advance of the Oregon Commission having done that. Before we took our steps to support the governor's initiative and putting our statement in the voters pamphlet opposing the measure, we talked with ODFW staff and people in Washington to get a sense of where the state lied on that. The commission is totally in support of it. Their director probably wasn't. Both of their candidates for governor have come out in support of the letter, and they're working simultaneously. There have been a couple of joint meetings of the two commissions, and there's more of them coming. So it's going to be a single solution for both states.
Well, thank you.
My pleasure.
We actually surveyed the field. I think that's a fair summary of the situation as Mr. Richards reports. Now we've got House District 34, Democratic incumbent Chris Harker and challenger Dan Mason. I think we'll have 20 minutes for this. We usually have 15, but I think it's 25 after. We can take it all the way up. You can have 8 to 10 minutes per. Mr. Mason, would you like to proceed? And Mr. Harker, again, you've got some flexibility because you've got 20 minutes to work with this. You can do a short one and open for questions, or a long one, and probably put everybody to sleep. Yeah.
Great. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with the Washington County Public Affairs Group. I got to speak with you during the primary process, and so I get to meet some of you. Wanted to take a quick moment and just thank the two public servants that are in the room that I know of, Mitch Greenlick, obviously my opponent, Chris Harker. As you campaign and go through this process, you learn what a sacrifice it really is to give up your time and your energy. And I'm sure Mrs. Harker would agree, or maybe there's some family time that's impacted there, here or there. I know my family has been impacted tremendously. I've gotten them to recruit to come out to Washington County. They live all over the state. Come out, go door to door, meet the folks of the district. The sexiness of running for office, it diminishes when you're out there in August, 90-degree heat, going door to door, sweat's dripping off your back. You walk up, if you're me, walk up, knock on a door. Bill comes to it, opens it up. I'm Dan Mason, for state representative for your district. Democrat or Republican is the question. Republican. Guy slams the door in your face. You go to the next door, and the next door, and you keep going. And why do you do that? Because you have a dream and a vision to do something great for your state. Because I grew up in Southern Oregon and saw how those small towns of my youth got economically devastated when the industries left. And yet, I moved to the most prosperous county, Washington County, and when I was 20, that seemed, it's an amazing place. You've got Nike and Intel, two biggest employers in the state, 7,800 jobs just at Nike campus alone. Yet when you're going door to door and you're talking to folks, why are we eliminating so many school positions in the Beaverton School District, over 300? And the biggest reason is that obviously we have revenue issues, but we've also had an anti-business attitude that's impacted across the state more heavily than Washington County. Obviously, we do feel it up here. And so you got less people paying in to the general fund through property taxes, state income taxes, and you got less people working. You obviously some of you may have seen, we put some billboards up about, there's folks, 800,000 Oregonians struggling on food stamps right now. We've got to be able to do something about that. Biggest thing to do, get people working. And changing the anti-business attitude in our state so we can attract more companies and businesses to come here, make sure entrepreneurs have the opportunity to succeed, that there's fair and predictable regulations, fair and predictable tax policy that will attract people to come here for our community to grow and thrive. A little bit of background on me. I'm a community manager for a property management company. Kind of like being a community organizer. We have real responsibilities like managing a budget and a staff, problem solving where over 500 residents in our community live. Every day I get to listen to some of the struggles that they're going through on a day-to-day basis. And I get to have an opportunity to help them through that process. I also get to listen to about 15, 20 small business owners that service our property at any given time, and hearing what they're struggling just to make the bills, make the payments on a carpet cleaner van, or a landscape company and all the different regulations they have to deal with during that management of their business. I'm running for state representative to make a positive impact on my community. I'm in a pretty favorable Democratic group right here, so you can imagine going, working in a district, campaigning in a district like this. Some folks have advised me that, I wouldn't say this. I had one friend when I was going through the process of looking to run. They said, "You're in District 34. That's a 16, 17 point Democratic registration advantage. From day one, you are a dead fish floating in the Willamette. So why do you keep going? Like I said, because you want to make a positive impact on the community, and you know that there's some bigger problems that we need to deal with. Obviously we all need we're starting to see in the Oregonian PERS reform. PERS reform needs to take place. I talked about the anti-business attitude that we need to change. I come from a housing background, and we've got a few baby boomers in the audience. Baby boomers are shifting, are starting to downsize to apartments because they can't afford to retire. You probably see a lot of commercials for reverse mortgages, trying to keep folks in their houses a little longer. Yeah, because we have this huge population, 90 million baby boomers, and they're starting to shift. I'm starting to see it in my line of work. And so housing policy is very important, especially out here in Washington County. As the Max line continues to develop out, I know we've got some areas over on 173rd, 170th, putting in very high density housing. We want to make sure that housing policy is appropriate. I know if one of the primary objectives from Tina Kotek, if she becomes Speaker of the House, is to push through Section 8 housing, that all property management companies would be forced to take this, which would impact your property rights tremendously. I'd urge you to look into that. This will be a big deal for all of us in Washington County. In closing, this has been a great process. It's been, we got 8 days left. Anybody excited for Election Day to be over?
Yes.
I'm a political nerd. I love this stuff. But I'll tell you what, it's a pretty intense process. And but it's been a great honor to do this. It's been a great honor to be able to get out there, meet the folks, be able to share ideas, and really just connect and offer something different than what we've currently had in the legislature. So with that, thank you.
Greetings, everyone. Thanks for being here, participating in this process. It is grassroots democracy at its finest. So I'm Chris Harker, District 34, current representative. Incumbent, have been in there for 4 years. By training, I am a scientist. Came out here as a medical researcher at OHSU. Did that for a number of years. And really enjoyed working in the academic research environment. Subsequent to that, I had a business that I grew over 19 years, which was the outgrowth of an idea I had as a scientist for some software that I needed. And I started this in the corner of the living room, and Dan, you're right, these things that we do certainly impact our families and our spouses, but starting that business up in the living room and taking over one room after another of the house had an even greater impact, I would offer. But over 19 years, I got to grow a business and hire people in this community up to where we had 27 employees working on South 5th Street bypass over in Beaverton. And we sold that business in January, and I feel like on the private sector side of my life, I'm living the American dream. I have had the opportunity to work with wonderful people and do well financially as a result of it. I also have been advised that having sold that business, I ought to move out of state because I would pay less taxes if I moved across the river. I cannot in good conscience do that. Why not? Because the education that I received was paid for by the taxpayers of this country. In fact, I had a grant from this country to help set up the business in the early days. I do this job as public service. I am a scientist and a businessman by training and experience, and 4 years ago I got a phone call asking me if I would be interested in running for the legislature. I laughed and said, "Thank you, Suzanne Bonamici, but no. I've got a pretty darn full life, I'm pretty busy." But she planted that seed, we thought about it, and I decided it was time for me to put up or shut up. I had never done public service, I had focused on myself, my family, my career, my business, and this was an opportunity for me to try to pay back. Similar, I guess, in some ways to what you're saying you would like to do, is have a positive impact on the community. So, what sets us apart? I've got a lot of experience in academia, in the research world, in the business world, and now I've got 4 years of experience and achievements in the state legislature. And as Mitch Greenlick said to me when I first was sworn in, he said, "Harker, you know, it doesn't really matter how much education you have. This is not a meritocracy. Your vote is one vote. Everyone in here has one vote. And the whole game is to figure out how to get the number of votes that you need to get something passed." Right? The experience of going into the legislature as a scientist and a businessman, where I was reasonably successful, reminds me of taking a highly trained physician and putting them into the courtroom to try to defend your loved one, all right? Very different skill sets, all right? And the experience that I've had in the private sector and now in government, I think have helped me deliver on my hope to improve things in this state. I have earned, in so doing, the support of a broad array of people and organizations in District 34, in Washington County, and in the state. I have the support of the tech community because I have a pretty unusual and useful set of skills when it comes to people in the legislature. There aren't many scientists, there aren't many people who have run small businesses, especially information technology businesses. So in this citizen legislature, we each bring these skill sets of our lives to bear, and I have an unusual and valuable set of skills. That's what leads to endorsement of my candidacy by the technology community. The fact that I have not just listened to small business people, but been a small business person for 19 years, and have to make bottom line, have to make payroll, have to provide health care insurance to all of my employees, leads to the support that I have in the business community. And I've got independent proprietors like Clear Creek Distillery, Steve McCarthy from there, and Rich Bader from Easy Street. And I've also got the support of Nike and Phil Knight. So I think that I have built up a pretty good cadre of supporters and a decent reputation of being an effective business person and legislator. Sorry, excuse me. And I think that maybe we will wrap up and take some questions, and let's see what's of interest to you folks and what we have to offer. Okay? Thank you for your time.
platitudes about, or not platitudes, but the party line about we want to reduce regulations and streamline government and all that. But I don't hear what regulations you want to do. What can you do? Can you give me 5 that you reduce that would help support? Give us an idea of what you do, because one person's regulations are another person's application.
When I think, when I say reducing regulations, that definitely doesn't mean eliminating all regulations. Because you gotta have a free marketplace that is fair. And you know, regulations obviously give the honest man, you know, guidance on what they can do within any given industry. I think that making sure that we have a sunset clause with every regulation that we do pass to make sure that it's doing what it's supposed to do, I think is appropriate. I think when the legislature passes any given regulation. I'm thinking of one that we did, we dealt with at our property. The 12th Valley Water District came through and said you need to upgrade your water meter. And this was, and they cited the specific information. You got to put a backflow device on this. This property is 26 years old. The regulation was passed in 1998, 97. This was in 2011 that they said you needed to come down and put this piece of equipment on your backflow device on your main water meter. If it was so important, why didn't they bring that to our attention 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 2 to 3 years after the regulation was passed? It was a fix of over $40,000 just for this backflow device, which not any property just has that money in the budget to just be able to drop in to deal with something that the legislature had passed. And they were willing to work with us with regards to it, but it's an example of something that was passed in 1998. They didn't enforce it until 2011, and so I think that some of these regulations that are put through, we need to have a sunset clause on them, so then the legislature has to come back and go, okay, we need to readdress this. I think every industry has a certain specific group of regulations that are either hindering or helping, depending on the group. So when you say, name 5, pieces of different regulations that you're going to eliminate, every industry has different regulations, and you need to bring in all players of the community with regards to that industry to make sure that whatever regulations that we're either adding or subtracting are beneficial to the community and good for public safety. Because we need consumer protection with regards to different regulations that take place.
Lois O'Brien. I have a question for Mr. Harker. I believe that you were part of the group that increased our fees and restrictions to the point of $700+ million a few years ago. And that was at a time, like now, where businesses were having to downsize and some leave the state. Then in October '09, I believe you wrote an essay in the Oregonian that felt that Oregonians should just pay more taxes. Is that right? It was October '09?
I will take you at your word that appeared at that point in time.
And when times are hard, that's hard to have to pay more when you're losing your job or cutting hours or something to that effect.
Okay, absolutely. This is a very tough call to make. I don't remember the details of what was written at that time, but I think that you are probably referring primarily to the legislation that we passed in the '09 session that became Measure 66 and 67 that changed tax structure. Is that it? And you want me to talk about that?
Well, actually, it was going on a little before that, but with that huge amount was a big blow to people, and government was already growing faster than the rate of what families were able to do.
Okay, so let me tackle it from this perspective. We came into a budgetary situation that was dire. We were looking at a 25% reduction in the general fund revenues that were available to run most of these services available in the state. It was too big a hole to address solely with cutting. If you want to look at the opposite extreme, it was too big a hole to fill with increased taxes and revenues. We had to find a place in the middle. And I believe that we did that. And we did that. It was my first term, and I was not in leadership, and I did not have a seat at the bargaining table. But I believe what we did was what I would have tried to do in my business, and in fact did try to do in my business when we hit the wall occasionally. What was that? Cut costs and increase revenues. It was the only way for us to get out of the hole. And not the only way, I think the best way. Was it perfect? No, it was a dire time.
So, Karen Boland, member of the forum, could you just state what District 34 is?
Oh, sure.
And then I'd be interested to hear what committees you were assigned. And then for both of you, I'd be interested to hear what your opinion is briefly on estate sales tax.
Okay, very good. Thanks for reminding me of that. Most people don't know the boundaries of each district in the state. But District 34 is entirely within Washington County. It starts up at the top of the hills there, which Portland calls the West Hills, and we tend to call it Baldwin Hills, and runs mostly out Barnes Road to 26 to 185th, right over there, and heads south down to TV Highway back through beautiful downtown Beaverton, up Canyon Road to the county line up by Sylvan. There is one area that is north of 26 and west of 185th, and that is primarily the Rock Creek area, and those are basically the boundaries of the district. Okay, committees. I've been in for 2 terms. First time I was on the healthcare committee, the education committee, and the general government subcommittee of Ways and Means. This current term, I have 3 committee assignments again: the Human Services Committee, the Higher Education Committee, which is something that I'm quite passionate about, and also I co-chair the Joint Legislative Committee on Audits and Information Management and Technology. Okay? Then a brief addressing of that lovely, familiar concept of state sales tax. We are hindered in some ways by the fact that we've got 2 of the 3 legs on our tax stool. We do not have we don't have sales tax. We've got income tax and property tax is limited by Ballot Measure 5 and other things. We also have a situation where we have tried, as a state, 9 times we have voted on sales tax, and it has gone down each time, as our governor responded saying, even lab rats learn more quickly than that. That being said, I am reminded very frequently on the doorstep and at house parties within District 34 that people are profoundly disappointed with what is going on in many state services, including the funding delivered to the Beaverton School District and the resulting class sizes that we're all very familiar with, and cutting out of subject matter. So they ask, can we have a sales tax? And I say, can you? It would help in some ways. I'm not quite so sure that the people of the state would pass it this time on the 10th try.
When someone fails 9 times, it's hard to want to go back to the drawing board with that. If you had a similar, with our revenue model, in our current situation, we need to grow our way out of it, which is adding tax revenue, adding people that are working, adding corporate taxes. You gotta have companies that are here, that are being successful and thriving. If you had a similar revenue model to the state of Washington, I believe something like that would be possible. It's not campaigning on a sales tax because that is a loser. We must be talking to the same people. There's some folks that are very much for it. There's a lot of folks that don't see where there'd be some benefits because obviously they're looking at their bank account. They're not purchasing milk, purchasing items for their home. And they're like, I don't want to pay sales tax. One of the most attractive things about our state is not having that. Unfortunately, then we have the dips in revenue and the overall fluctuations. So with our current situation, job creation is the most important thing that we can do with the revenue model that we have. And I know obviously the governor is talking about tax reform. Be pretty interesting what that'll look like in the next couple of years and what will come through the session. But frankly, to end a lot of our revenue issues, specifically the school cuts in the Beaverton School District, we've got to grow our way out of this. And we've got to make sure that Southern Oregon and Eastern Oregon are positively impacted with industries. There's a couple of bills in the legislature that are just sitting there that could potentially impact these. One of them is opening up Columbia River water so you can irrigate all over Eastern Oregon. Because what they put things on barges and they push them through the Columbia River. Talking to Sean Robbins with the Greater Portland Inc., he said that over 5,400 jobs would be created with just $1 billion of activity going through the port. We need to be able to do things. We're a natural resource state. There's opportunities there. There is logging on state lands. Only makes up 4% of our lands, but we should be utilizing a resource so we can pay for these school districts that are getting absolutely hammered. These are things that are in the legislature right now that we need leadership on to be able to push through and persuade the governor to sign off on.
Article Deed Forum member and a voter in District 34. PERS, Public Employment Retirement System, grossly underfunded, with the impacts here felt every classroom in the state at this point, Beaverton School District being hammered among others, everybody else. What can the legislature do to correct this, get this in balance, and what can what within the powers the legislature has, can it do, it should do, and Mitch, when it's your turn, I hope you speak to this also. Thank you.
Darn good and darn important question. There are certain things that we cannot do because these, as the Supreme Court has declared, this is a contract, but there is room to make some improvements. And one of the outgoing board members of PERS recently identified them pretty clearly in a piece that was in the Oregonian. But we, for instance, right now, the state picks up a tab for people to pay their state taxes. That was committed to a long time ago. We currently do that for people who have moved outside of the state. Doesn't make too much sense to me. That's one place where we can go. There are others. I tend to, for a Democrat, maybe it reflects my business background, I think that there is room for improvement in this regard. I also am a Tier 1 employee because I came out here to work at OHSU, 28 years ago, I think. I think when I see my PERS statement annually and there's 8% being granted, that doesn't seem to make sense right now. I wish I could get 8% on any investment with consistency.
30 seconds, real quick. PERS reform's needed. I believe all politicians should be opting out of PERS. They should be contributing to the problem. If I'm elected, I would definitely not participate in it. Like Representative Harker said, your 8% guaranteed increase, that's incredible. I'm a Ducks fan. Mike Bellotti shouldn't be getting $40,000 a month. First, retirement. It's incredible. Most people will look at that situation and say, that's definitely not fair. It's not a fair situation. It needs reform. There's a lot of different ideas out there, and hopefully we can come together to restructure it. Obviously, you can't do anything with PERS 1 or Tier 1 PERS, but there are some opportunities for the future beneficiaries.
Thank you, gentlemen, very much for your allowed extended questions. The folks with questions here, you can ask them, Senator Representative Greenlick, too. So thank you, gentlemen. I call Mr. Representative Greenlick up, and he's going to be at any questions that would be asked will be directed to him also. His opponent isn't here, so he gets to deal with this time as much as he wants to. I guess he would want to leave some questions.
Absolutely. I'm kind of a rookie here. It's only the second time I've been here. In 2002, and I remember that first time very well. When I get back to that, the first question was asked me from somebody on this side of the room in 2002 debates. I spent 30 years of my life as director of research for Kaiser Permanente, and 10 years as chair of the Department of Preventive Medicine at the medical school. And the last 10 years I've been in the legislature, and over that time have become sort of the go-to person in the House for healthcare reform. So a lot of my attention is chair of the healthcare committee for 2 years of the House and co-chair for the last year has been to move healthcare reform in Oregon. Hers is not the only problem we have in this state. We have healthcare costs essentially eating up the budget, both in terms of healthcare for the Medicaid population and healthcare for the state employees. We'll be at 40% of the state's budget if we let this increase go on. So I've been actively involved. It's hard to take complete credit for anything. In the legislature, we have committee members, we have the other side of the building. The other side of the building is a place where good bills go to die. You have to figure out how to deal with them. But we've done some really quite extraordinary stuff, particularly extraordinary in the last session where we had a 30-30 split between Democrats and Republicans in the House. I had a co-chair of the healthcare committee. Either of us had absolute power to veto anything, to veto any hearing, to veto any vote, and yet we produced in the 2011 and 2012 session significant, huge healthcare reforms that passed in the House with more than 50 votes in each of the things. We passed a major transformation bill to transform the way the Oregon health plan care is delivered to them. We got as a reward a $1.9 billion subsidy from the federal government to help try and build the innovations, because we've agreed to reduce our rate of inflation 2 points below what they're predicting in the medical inflation rate. They're predicting 5.4% in medical inflation over the next 10 years. We've agreed to 3.2%, and as a rate increase. And if we get that, we'll get to keep the $2 billion they just gave us. If we do that, we'll save the federal government about $2 trillion over the next 10 years, and we'll save us several $100 billion in terms of state money for Medicaid. We also created the Oregon Health Insurance Exchange. You know, one of the issues of Obamacare is to create a national and or a bunch of state Medicaid exchange where people, individuals and small businesses can go in and buy health insurance at a reasonable rate for small businesses to move to a fixed contribution rather than a fixed benefit program, so that our employees will have more choice and they'll be able to decide in advance how much money they want to put in. It was strongly supported by Associated Oregon Industries, the NFRB, the Oregon Business Council, the Oregon Business Association. Made me nervous being able to bill that all these business groups supported. It was recognition of what a good business economy we have in Oregon. But they were there with us. Again, that bill, first part of it passed in 2011, the last part passed in 2012. Those bills included, again, passed in the House with more than 50 out of 60 votes. Very little opposition once we actually work things out. You know, we hear about all this conflict in the legislature, but the fact is, about 60% of the bills that pass out of the legislature are virtually unanimous. They're technical bills, they're worked out in committee. You have work groups of all sides. You get them out of committee and it gets to the floor, and it passes 52 to 7. I'm sometimes one of the 7, but more frequently one of the 52. But it's basically pure technical work where folks work together very well. Some committees that didn't work out too well in the last session, but certainly didn't healthcare. We were the most productive committee in the building. And another 25% of bills are split. It's split hard, but they're not split along party lines. I passed a bill in my freshman session working with Associated Oregon Industries to get $100 million out of the Oregon Investment Council money into emerging Oregon. That's something I did. Into emerging Oregon industries. That bill passed 32-28, and it had 18 Republicans and 14 Democrats making up the 32. That's another 25%. So we hear all this stuff in the newspapers, you know, it's dog, man bites dog kind of stuff, with about 15% of the bills that you fight at over party lines. And we passed many of those, even in a situation where where there was 30 members of the Democratic caucus and 30 members of the Republican. I look back at my career now after 10 years. Harriet won't let me announce for more than one session in the head, but I plan on being the first person in the State House that's 100 years old. So I expect to be around. But if I look back at a comment.
It was just enthusiasm.
Good, that's it. That's right, that's it. There's one person older than me in the House, and he's agreed to step down 2 weeks before his 100th birthday, so he won't spoil my plan to be the first one. I think we do some extraordinary things in Oregon. We hear this about the business environment. Forbes magazine does a lot of ranking of things. In fact, the Pearl District was just ranked as the 5th hippest district in the country by Forbes. But they also rank economic environment, business environment. And Oregon has been number 6 based on all the factors around the environment for business. We hear about the horrible business taxes, but the fact is the Oregon business tax method taxes businesses only on profits made in products sold in Oregon. So Google can be here, which is a good thing because there are lots of jobs and use up lots of energy that won't go to waste if they weren't doing it. But they virtually pay no business taxes because they don't sell products in Oregon. Nike pays very, very small amount of business taxes because they're not selling products out of their factories here in Oregon. Their product is going somewhere else. Why do you think Intel just doubled its capacity in the Winter plant? It's because they don't pay much in the way of taxes. Their taxes would only be based on sales in Oregon. And some of us buy computers that have Intel in it, so they do pay some, and they're a great corporate citizen. But I think that's not a major problem. Okay, do we have time for questions?
Lots of questions. I go on to one up. We have 3.5 minutes for questions.
Good.
Chris Leslie, forum member. The two previous speakers said they were passionate about their beliefs, and you seem to start out with PERS. Do you have a solution for PERS, or could those contracts be voided because of self-interest conflicts?
Well, for one thing, I'm not in PERS. I worked at OHSU for 10 years and wasn't in PERS at that time, and I've never been in PERS. Well, there may have been a small amount of something at one time. Basically, I'm not in PERS. In 2003, we took some hard votes, and we changed PERS, and we created Tier 3. So all new employees are not going into Tier 1. We've got those employees coming in at much more like a business-oriented kind of plan. We've made contracts with people. We've collectively bargained those contracts. Where do you think that 8% came from? It came in